I believe that most of you realize that I was a pastor in Boulder City for 30 years at St. Andrew's Catholic Church. I want to assure you that the finest homilies were always given on Mother's Day. They were inspiring, they were creative, they were so sincere, they were memorable, and all because women gave the homilies on Mother's Day. Why should a frustrated, celibate old man speak on motherhood on Mother's Day when you've got 1,000 women in the congregation? And there's one that stands out beautifully, memorably. I don't know if it was her first child and she wanted to speak about motherhood. I don't know if it was her presentation or her words or the fact that she was 8 months pregnant. And I had to help her up the steps, and they applauded. I still remember her. I don't remember the name, but I remember her. Now, what I'm going to do today, I want to talk about memories, because there's something very special about mothers and their creativity and their grace and their charism to create memories. And I want to tell you something. As the years roll on and everything else disappears, it's the only thing we have left are memories. So I'm going to share some things that went on in my family, mostly responsible in regards to my mother. Now, not because she was any greater than any mothers here, not because my family was very special, because my family was as neurotic as your family. And maybe even a bit more. Very difficult to convince people to create memories. And yet they're so easy to create. I remember sitting at the kitchen table, and my mom was teaching her 4 or 5-year-old little granddaughter how to make lasagna. And little Joni was kneeling on the chair next to the table, and my mother would show her how to put down the bolognese sauce, then a little bit of the lasagna pasta, and a little bit of the rich ricotta. And my mom allowed her to make her own little mistakes, but always encouraging her. Little Joni. You see, they weren't just making lasagna. They were creating memories. I'm going to see Joni in a couple of weeks. Going to go up and see my sister in Boston. And Joni's taking care of my sister, her mother. And Joni remembers the time when she hanged on to Grandma's apron. And Grandma taught her how to cook. And she cherished those memories. I don't know what they call that thing, those of you who are old as me, or maybe even older. You know that little thing that you whipped the whipped cream with? What do you call it? Can I have some help here? The what? Huh? Well, they used to whip the whipped cream, you know, the heavy cream you got from the farmers. And my mother could have banged that whipper, or whatever you call it, on the bowl and take all the whipped cream off. But no, she knew what she was doing. She left a little bit of that whipped cream on there so that either Pat or myself could lick that whipper. And we knew whose turn it was. There was no fight whose turn it was. Besides whipping heavy cream, Mom was creating memories. Women, mothers, have a grace and the talent to do that. I remember one time I came home from school. I used to go to Our Lady of Grace School, not far from the house. And my mom was in the garden. She loved the garden. And I was going in through the back door, and she waved me over. She says, "Come here, Joseph, come here." And she picked 2 red, ripe tomatoes from her plants. And she says, let's go sit under the cherry tree and eat these 2 tomatoes in the shade. And we went over there. We sat on an old broken down bench, and we bit into those wonderful, no other better way of eating a tomato right from the garden. And I said, Mom, it would be nice if we had a little bit of salt. I remember those days when you could get a little bit, like an inch tall, in a little paper wrapper or something, a little piece of cardboard. She pulled one out of her pocket of the apron, and she says, "Look." Well, we weren't just eating a tomato under the cherry tree. We were creating memories. Oh, I suppose if you're going to cook raviolis tonight, you'll go to the local market. Well, that isn't the way it was done in the Anise restaurant. And most of the Italians, they would make their own raviolis about 4 inches square, using that very, very rich ricotta. And then it was Pat's task and my task to get a fork and just whip the edges of that ravioli so that the ricotta wouldn't come out. That was an important job, very important job. But the job wasn't as important as the memories that we have today. I remember returning home after Mass so often on a Sunday morning, or maybe after a local traditional Thanksgiving football game with the nearby town, and coming home and going into the kitchen and being confronted with wonderful smells of cooking. I have a friend in San Diego, and every feast day, every birthday, every anniversary day, they go out to eat. Why? Create memories. Do the cooking at home. I suppose you could say that Monday is laundry day in your home, not in our home. When you have 11 people living in a house, laundry was every day. Every day. I remember coming home from school and that wonderful smell of a hot iron on linen sheets permeated the house. Freshly ironed sheets. They ironed everything. Memories. Oh, and she was more than enthusiastic than at other times. She baked bread. She didn't do that too often because she was busy with 11 people. But every now and then she'd bake bread, 10, 15 loaves. And then it was our task to take the majority of that bread and share it with the neighbors. Just like she did with the first fruits from the garden And just like the neighbors did with the first fruits from their garden. Now, that's a biblical tradition. My mother never read the Old Testament. She didn't even know what the Old Testament was. Where did she learn that? Where did all those little old Italian women in the neighborhood learn that? We'd end up with 3 or 4 loaves of bread. Memories. My godmother lived next door to us. Then eventually, after the war, World War II, her and her family moved to West Covina in California. But my godmother was a good baker. And if I was playing in the yard with other kids or working in the garden, and Lena, that was her name, if she had baked something or she wanted to give me something, she'd call me over and, Gumbada Joe, come on. Whatever it was, baked goods, or maybe a nickel, a dime. And I'd hug her and thank her, and then I'd bring it into the house and I'd say, look what my godmother gave me, Mom. Okay, now you sit down at the table and write her a thank you note. I said thank you to her. Sit down at the table and write her a thank you note. Today, I am addicted in writing thank you notes. If somebody gives me something and they will say, oh, you don't have to write a thank you note. I says, my mother will spin in the grave if I don't write you. She didn't even only teach me gratitude. She created memories. I suppose if you get a hole in your sock or your stocking, you throw it out these days, right? Say, right, yes, Father, yes. Now, that isn't the way it was way back in the 40s and 50s. You look up in the Webster's Dictionary, D-A-R-N, darn. It's not an equivalent of a flippant curse. No, darn means to sew holes in your socks. And especially, I don't know why it seemed always in the wintertime, we'd sit around the table after dinner darning socks. And when you have 22 feet and a family, you got a lot of darning to do. But I don't remember whose sock I darned or whatever. I remember the memory of sitting around and talking and doing what we're supposed to be doing. My mother wasn't a very exceptionally spiritual person. I'm not going to get up here and say my mom was a spiritual person. No, my mother was a little superstitious too, like some of you. She had a superstition that whenever those powerful, thunderous lightning, powerful rain, stormy rains would come, she would put a hoe and a rake on the lawn, crisscross, so that the lightning wouldn't hit the house. And we gave her a rough time about that. Mom, come on now, where in the world did you learn that? Did you learn that in that little town in Italy where you came from? And she just kind of sat back and let us have our fun. And one day, little Joni, who lived next door, same little gal who made lasagna, she rushed over one day and she says, Grandma, you forgot to put the hoe and the rake on the lawn. My mother goes out in the garage and gets the hoe and the rake. And we gave her a rough time that night. And you know what she did? She just paused and she looked at us and she said, has the lightning ever hit the house? Memories. Came back one day from the 4th grade, and I was angry. Just as angry as a 4th grader could get. That Sister St. Rose. I don't know why they called her St. Rose. She was not a saint. I said, Mom, Sister St. Rose doesn't like me. And so I don't like her. My mother sat down at the table. She says, you know, Joseph, you don't have to like Sister St. Rose. And she doesn't have to like you. But Sister St. Rose has something that you got to get from her, and that's all her knowledge. So don't worry about being liked by her, and don't you worry about liking her. If you want to be liked, you always come home, because you will always be liked at home. How do you forget that? Precious, precious memories. You mothers, all you grandmothers, and your great-grandmothers. You have a gift, you have a charism. All you people in mothering professions, counseling, teaching, doctors, nurses, you have an opportunity to create memories for those that you serve. Create those precious memories. It's not only your gift, it's your vocation. Because, as I said in the beginning, as the years roll on and the hairs, whatever's left of them, begin to get gray, there's only one thing left: memories. Happy Mother's Day.